about how assignment works and all about why it's so important it is that you that does your assignment and why God trained you and so on. So it's all about stressing the importance of the individual. So when I'm talking about assignment, guys, I'm talking about not generic Christianity. I'm talking about, as I said earlier, that which God wants you to do as distinct from the person sitting next to you. Noah, there is a flood coming. I need you to build an ark. Joseph, there's a famine coming. Get my people into Egypt. Moses, there's a freedom coming. Get my people into the promised land. Esther, there's a genocide. David Hodgson, there's a change in culture coming. I'm bringing the kingdom of God to the marketplace. I'm establishing sheep nations. Go and head this up. Go and teach. That's an assignment. These are all assignments. Now remember, as I said in the beginning, guys, we don't just work within your capacity. Don't be intimidated if I'm quoting billions of dollars or picking on these great biblical identities who changed nations. We all work within our capacity and within our gifting that God's given us. Okay? Let's liken it quickly to the workplace, just to give you a bit of an analogy. Let's just say you've just got a job as a marketing manager at Fonterra, a big company in New Zealand, I think. So you turn up at work on Monday morning, assuming you're not at some lecture randomly in town, and you turn up at work and you have to conduct yourself by the Fonterra Code of Conduct at work. So you've got to be suitably dressed, you shouldn't be smoking in the office, no sexist behaviour, you're not allowed to use the company phone to phone your spouse and stuff like that. So there's all this code of conduct that you live by and behave by when you work for Fonterra. But that's not why you're there. Okay, that's just what everyone does there. You have to be the marketing manager. And if you don't be the marketing manager, that company's not going to survive. They have to have marketing. Otherwise it's going to collapse. So everyone's depending on you to do your job at that company, at Fonterra. And so is the boss. And the boss is going to sack you if you don't do it. Okay? Christianity is exactly the same as that. You can become a Christian, you can go to church, and you live by the Christian code of conduct, and you're no more stealing, no more punching people who upset you. None of this stuff, everything, computer's nice and clean these days. All the stuff that goes with generic Christianity. But that's not why you're there. Okay, it's not why God put you on earth. That's just what He expects all Christians to do. You have an assignment to do, and if you don't do your assignment, your faith has no meaning. Just the same as your employment at Fonterra had no meaning if you don't have a role. Okay, job description, what are you supposed to do? And it's exactly like that in Christendom. Okay? Your assignment is going to revolve around two things, two main things. There's lots of other criteria. But the two big things that we have to understand is that it's going to revolve around your specific gifting and your life's training, your life's experiences. Okay? So these are just clues to help you find your assignment. So we're talking about everything from a marketplace perspective, but we're lining it up with scriptures. So when I'm talking about gifting, I'm not talking about the fivefold gifts to any great extent. I'm talking about that which you are good at. What did God put in your DNA to make you good at stuff? And it could be you're a good singer, it could be you're an entrepreneur, it could be you're the most patient person on earth, so you're going to be a good counsellor, or good at knitting. We've got a knitting ministry now in church. It's like they knit blankets for people, probably you guys who live too close to the South Pole, somewhere where people are cold, they knit blankets for. And, that takes patience and so on. I don't have this. I would never knit one stitch and I'd be ticked off with the whole thing. So the point being, we all have these things that we're good at. Now God deliberately put that in your DNA so that you do that. Because He wants you to do stuff, so He makes you good at stuff. Moses, he's a gifted leader. Without that gifting, how on earth was he going to take 2 million Jews, lead them across the desert, take them right up to the verge of the promised land? They all chicken out, and he says, come with me, we're going to go for the next 38 years and die in the desert, let's go. That takes leadership. Okay, so he had that incredible gift of leadership, amongst other things. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a leader, and unfortunately I'm a teacher, so I don't particularly want to be a teacher, I don't mind being a leader, and I love being an entrepreneur, but those are my skill sets. And so I do them. I'll come back to that later. Okay, so God has deliberately designed us that way. It would make sense, therefore, that we do those things. Always try and empathise with the Lord. Just like you're sitting next to God as the CEO, God's the boss, He's the managing director, He owns it, and you're the CEO. What would you be thinking if you've trained people, you've given them giftings to do stuff and they weren't doing it? You're doing something else. Why is Dave Hodgson running the children's ministry when I need him to create a sheep nation? What's he doing that for? Come on, listen to me. So we need to figure that out. What are we good at? Everybody is good at something. There's no one who's good at nothing. Okay, we're all good at stuff. Some people are like Bezalel or Heliab, and those dudes are good at everything. Don't you hate those type of people? They just can do everything, you know. So some people are that way, and they're supposed to do everything. You know, more is expected if you've been given the skills. That's just how it is. Let's just liken it to you've got a Learjet here, and you want to get to Melbourne. You can jump in that Learjet and you can drive it. It's going to make a racket on the road. It's going to overheat. You're going to knock people off their bicycles with the wings. You can't reverse it. The cops are going to arrest you. You're going to get to the ocean. It's just going to sink. It might float. It's never going to work because you're not doing what it was designed to do. You jump in that thing and you fly out there, you'll be there in an hour and a half. That's because it was designed to do that. And we are designed to do stuff. So we must do that. Okay, so think of that when you're pondering your assignment. What is it that, you know, I've had this prophetic word, I'm trying to join the dots, I'm doing my spiritual due diligence, if you want to term it that way. I need to understand, is this my, because once you have the confidence that you know your assignment, you're doing it, and you know it, you're into it, you can do anything. You can build an ark, okay, with no chainsaws and no bunnings and no nothing, and catch dinosaurs and put it in. The other thing, guys, the next thing, I don't want to dwell on giftings because you've all been preached to death on that in church, I'm sure. So let's go to life's training. The Lord is never going to, it's like the military, the Lord's never going to send you into battle when he hasn't trained you up. So you look back on your life, I'm going to tell you a bit about mine in a minute. You know, all of those things that you've done, no matter how good or bad or whatever, whether you're in jail, whether you were actually had an abortion, it doesn't matter, okay? It's all part of the training deal, so that now you are prepared to do, you're trained up for such a time as this, or such a time as the Lord calls you to do something, okay? So don't look back on your past and I'm going to just wipe that out of my memory and think, no, that's no good, because that's part of your life. This is your life's training. I've been through stuff that people shouldn't go through, and I look back now and think, it was awesome. You know, it's now train me. You can take on Babylon. You go out there and take on greed. No one's done it for 3,000 years. You expect a backlash, a big backlash. And so you better be trained to handle a backlash. And now I've been trained to handle a backlash. I've been in the SAS, I've been in the Scouts, I've been blown up, I've been on the bottom of the ocean for 35, all sorts of things that have happened. But it's all training for now to be able to do what we're doing. And the Lord does that all the time. Moses, back to him. He had such a lot of training before he was summoned to his assignment. 40 years in the palace of Pharaoh. Who else can go back? You know, go and talk to the Pharaoh. You don't just take off and go and talk to Jacinta. You know, hey Jacinta, I'm seeing you at 9 tomorrow. You can't get into there. Okay? But he could, because he knew everybody. That was his network. So he could go back there. And then he had 40 years in the desert of Midian. He took that whole Israelite slave army through there. He knew that desert backwards. So that's all his life's experience and his gifting of leadership combining, and away you go. Okay, and you can look at that in the Bible all over the place. Guys, it's always going to be mission impossible. I think I alluded to that a bit earlier. Your assignment is always going to be beyond what you can do in the natural. So don't be intimidated if you think, I can't do that. The Lord's saying to me, David, create a sheep nation. Yeah, sure, Lord. You know, what's that look like? And it's massive, okay. But you're going to have the favour of God with you, because if you could do it in your own strength, I think I said this earlier, the devil can shut you down in a heartbeat. Okay? Because the devil, when the Lord said to Joshua to go in there and sort out the promised land, he said there are 7 nations in there, each of which is greater and mightier than yours. He's a full-on God guy, each of which is greater and mightier than yours. Okay? But I will clobber them and make the way. I'll win the victory. So that's the same thing with our assignments. I mean, creating a sheep nation or a sheep community, it's a big assignment. Your assignments are going to be big and intimidating. But the Lord, if you do it God's way, you get on to do it, then he's with you, and then the devil cannot overcome you. The devil, keep in mind, Satan, he tried to take out God. He wanted to be like God. That's why he got cast out and Lucifer became Satan. Okay? So he knows he can't take out God. So he goes after the image of God on the earth, which is us, which he can take out. Okay? And if we step out of the covering of the Lord, and then we are vulnerable. That's why it's so important we stay under the covering of God and the local church and other things in my mind. But anyway, the point being that we need to be under that covering and have the favour of God, and the devil cannot take that out. He's always going to try, but God is always going to. And also remember, the devil is made in the image of an angel. You're made in the image of God, so you're actually a superior being, just at the bottom of the DNA of all of you. Okay? Now, also, it has to be you that does your assignment, so you're not going to get out of it and pass it on to someone else. Okay, because of your training is obviously unique. No one else has lived your life, not even your twin sister. Okay, you still all live different lives and different thoughts and different things that happen to you. And so too your gifting ratios are different to everybody else's. So you have to do your assignment, exactly like it's up there. People are relying on you to do yours. Right? I'll talk about that in a minute. What are we doing? Is it 12:30 or 12 o'clock? 12 o'clock. Yeah. Okay, let's look at some biblical background quickly. Let's look at the Joseph journey. He's the guy that, I think he was the first guy really in the Bible that really actually completed his assignment. Lots of guys did pretty well before that. Noah did pretty well, but they had a problem after the flood. Abraham, kept on wandering off the wrong way and doing bits and pieces and so on. But Joseph really got there, and he did it. So he's a good guy to follow. He's pretty good in business and so on. And there's some obvious stuff to make it easy. So from the shepherd boy receiving his assignment, in terms of the two dreams, all the way through all the adversity that took place to when he eventually took over the economy of Egypt. Three main reasons why Joseph achieved this and nobody else had. First thing, guys, is that he understood his assignment. And this is what I'm trying to get over today. He found his assignment, he wasn't looking for it, but he got given it by God, and he understood it, and he went on and did that. So he got his assignment through those dreams, those two dreams when he was 17. You have to remember now, we're talking about gifting as well as life training. So his gifting, he was the best in all of the known world there at interpreting dreams. That's a gift. Your gift is with you. People often say, oh, he's only 17 as a kid, he wouldn't have understood. The gift is in you. 17, you're at 12 years old, you're a man in ancient times. Okay? This guy's 17, he's way beyond being a man. So his gifts are fully developed and he can understand it. Yeah. Okay, so don't misinterpret the fact. He knew his assignment from those dreams. You can tell here, this is what Jacob's his dad, says to him, do you believe that your mother and I are going to bow down to you? This is everybody countering what he knows, okay? Remember, he knows he's the best in the world. When he had to go and army to tell Pharaoh, no one else could tell Pharaoh. The professionals couldn't tell Pharaoh, but he could, okay? So, and he's thinking, Jacob says, do you think your mother and I are going to bow down before you? And he must have been thinking, Mum died 3 years ago. Rachel died 3 years ago giving birth to Benjamin. What are you talking about? It's nothing to do with that. There's a whole lot of, there's a famine coming, there's all this stuff coming, there's a global financial crisis coming, we have to get you out of here and stuff. So it must have been so frustrating for him, but that's what was going on at the time. So he's got to provide the solutions. And the Lord was saying to him, you need to get into Egypt. Egypt is the dominant economy in the world at the time. Okay? And you need to get in there and change what's driving that, change the whole thing, which he did, and bring your people in, get them in there, and we will create sheep nations out of this Egypt. That's actually what's going on. Getting, the people of God into in the right positions is so crucial. So anyway, that's what happened in the end, as you know. But the reason that he knew it had to be him that did this, because keep in mind, in ancient times, and even in many cultures in modern times, these big assignments are always going to fall upon the eldest in the family, not like the youngest in the family, second youngest or whatever. Okay? So you would expect that one to fall on Reuben, the eldest in the family. But Joseph knew that he was the one, and this is an obvious thing, but I don't know if you picked it or not, he was the one and the only one in all of that family that had a level of moral rectitude that could carry this out. Okay? And the reason he knew that, I'll come to you, he blatantly knew that, it was obvious to me anyway. Okay? But the thing is, Reuben should be the first guy to get it, but he's already slept with his father's wife like that. He slept with Bilhah. How on earth is he going to get past Potiphar's wife, who's a good-looking girl? Okay? He's never going to get past Potiphar's wife. That's the end of it. Okay? God's plans imploded because this guy's driven by lust. All right? Simeon and Levi are the next two oldest brothers. By that time, they've already killed the Shechemites. They went and trashed the Shechemites. And yet, the Israelites are living in that area, and the Shechemites outnumber them, and these clowns go and do this because of they offended Diana, or raped Diana. But the point is that's tantamount in the modern era to an international crisis, and the whole of the tribes had to move out of there. Okay, so imagine how would these guys were crazy, those two at that time. How are they going to manage the fickle Egyptian political system when they get there? The Pharaoh, the dynasty there was the Hyksos dynasty at the time. They weren't even Egyptians. In fact, they came from the Amalekites, from Esau, and they were running Egypt. So how are these guys going to get there? Double the taxes, because that's what Joseph did. How are they going to do that if they can't even manage this little Sheshemite deal? There's no way on earth that's going to... And keep in mind, the Egyptians thought of the Israelites, if shepherds were the nomadic ferals of the time, homeless people. And that's what they thought of the Israelites at the time. You guys are just feral creatures, can't even dress properly, can't even build a house, living in tents. So why would you manage our economy and our political system? Okay? Judah was next in line. Married Canaanite women already by that time, and then he slept with his daughter Tamar soon after that. He's never going to get past Potiphar's wife. Not only did he sleep with her, he gave her the symbols of his identity. Ladies and gents, if sex is more important than identity, it's always going to be a big problem. And that's a huge problem in the mountain of economics and the mountain of the arts, and especially where they meet. Okay, you guys know the seven mountain philosophy? Yeah, don't have time to teach them that. Okay, so you just look at the Me Too movement. There's a classic example of what's going on in the modern era, where this business of sex is just more important than your whole assignment. Next, you've got Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Those are the next four brothers in line. They're all older than Joseph, and they're all up to no good. Joseph is actually managing his older brothers, and this is why I say Joseph knows that he's the one with moral rectitude. He's busy sending messages back to his dad, to Jacob, sending him emails and saying, these guys are up to no good, these brothers of mine. They're selling the sheep out the back door. They're corrupt. Okay, if they can't manage the sheep, they're never going to manage Potiphar's household or an economy. Not going to happen. Okay, so you get the point that I'm making, that this is the dynamics that are going on at the time. Okay, so the third reason he achieved his assignment was because he knew if he failed, his people are wiped out. There's people relying on him, and he knew that. It's pretty obvious to him. Okay, so we each have specific and unique tasks to fulfill, and other people are relying on you to do it. So I don't like to put burdens on you. It's easy to do our assignments, we just get on and do it. We're better off doing it than not doing it. Noah didn't do his. A lot of swimming. Okay, and if Esther as well, they would have all been killed. She stopped a genocide by doing her assignment. They would have been wiped out. So there's that slide on both sides. That's from Oz Hillman, if you can't see the little caption at the bottom. TGIF, I think it's today, God is first. It's not thank God it's Friday. But he's an amazing guy, American. There are amazing people in America. And he's an awesome guy. The thing is, I put that up there so that people know that other people are relying on him, but that was actually something that was said to him. And he was he's a publisher and a marketing guru, working for contracting different magazines, very middle class, affluent sort of guy, and everything started going wrong. The devil moved in and he got crunched. He lost everything, lost all his money, lost all his clients, lost his family, his wife and kids took off, and he was in a mess. And he was lying curled up in the fetal position when a mentor came in and said that to him. You must not let circumstances destroy you. Too many in the kingdom are counting on you to come through this because of the calling on your life. And it was that little phrase there that picked him up and got him going again. Okay, and now he's used, so remember it's all about gifting and life's training. The life's training was all to do with him being a publisher and a marketing guy and so on. He had been a lay pastor before that, so he's gone to Bible college and so on. And now there he is, picking himself up, and now he's become a writer and an author of Christian marketplace material. And he sends out devotionals that go to over 250,000 people every day in the marketplace. Okay, and so many people who were depending on him can now depend on him reliably. And he's very good at what he does. And that's a free devotional, I think. Okay, now I want to talk to you about a live SAS operation that we did back in 1976, because this will show you the individual, the importance of the individual. Okay, so I can tweak this properly. This is a picture of Africa, obviously, the continent, and right over there is Rhodesia, which is now called Zimbabwe. Okay, and that's where we were operating. All the countries around us declared war on us in 1965, except South Africa, and they supplied us oil. We'd actually declared independence from England, and England then blockaded our harbours with warships, and the whole world put international sanctions on us, except Israel and South Africa. And we ended up with a war for the next 14 years against our neighbours. Okay, that's what happened. And I was in the SAS in Rhodesia, okay, the Special Forces. Now, you can see on this little map there's Rhodesia, or I'm calling it Rhodesia because that's what it was at the time, there's Zambia and there's Mozambique, and they all three meet on the Zambezi River about there. So if we go on to the next slide, that's where they all three meet. So this is Rhodesia, that's Zambia, and that's Mozambique. This is the Zambezi River, fourth biggest river in the world. You can't swim across it, it's flowing fast, there's lots of floating handbags that eat you. This is Rhodesia's full, with all of us, and this is a hot area because everyone's trying to wipe us out. So there's the Mozambique army is there, the Zambian army is there. Each of these armies are hosting massive groups of terrorists that are coming into Rhodesia and taking on our army and killing our civilians. So we call them terrorists, they call themselves freedom fighters. Okay? So just different ideologies, but that's the war that's going on. So, and keep in mind, this is a whole different world to the apartheid South Africa. There was no apartheid and so on. But the point being, there were three big ferries, there were massive boats here that were carting terrorists across Zambezi every night into the southern part here, and then crossing our border and going in here and killing civilians. So our job as the SAS was to advance up here to Kanyemba, which was our forward military base. There was a bunch of people looking after that. And we had to cross the Zambezi River and go and blow up those ferries. Okay? So that's what we did. So one Thursday night, 18 SAS guys arrived here at Kanyemba. Only 18. 10 of them stayed behind to secure the base camp. And then the other 8 waited till Friday night. Most of the SAS operations are done on Friday night because that's when everybody has a scoop. Even terrorists, even military people, everyone's in the clubs or whatever, and it's a lot easier to take people on. Remember, I'm not glorifying war, by the way, I'm just telling you so we can understand individuals, all right? You can look this up. These are all, I can't even exaggerate anymore because of the internet, which is a shame. Okay, so the truth is, we paddled across here at night time with 8 of us, okay, canoes, they're called kleppers, and we hide them in the bush there. 2 guys are going to look after them. So now there's only 6 people left to go and blow up these ferries. And so now we have to creep through the bush here and then get to the end of Zumbo, and or to the outskirts, we put 2 people there to guard our way out. If we get compromised, we need to get out quickly. Then there's now 4 of us left to go and do this job. There's thousands of troops in Zumbo, Mozambique, Frelimo troops. And they've been fighting wars for years. Frelimo fought for a long time before the Rhodesian War started. So this is a war zone, man, big time. Much, much longer than World War II. Our war went on for 3 times as long as World War II. Okay? 14 years. So now there's 4 of us to go creeping through there. We went through the camp. It was Friday night. Most of them have had a little bit too much to drink. They're fast asleep. It's 1 a.m. Even the dogs, a lot of them have dogs for alert. They're all sleeping over there. We go right through. Even went under the flagpole. They left the flag up, which is a no-no in the military. That means they've had too much to drink. That's a good sign for the SAS guy. And then we get down near the ferries. It was like a big, like a tip, like a trash heap where they threw all their rubbish, bottles and stuff there. And so we left 2 guys by that trash heap right next to these ferries. And there's 3 big, massive boats, bigger than this room. Longer than this room, and in there are troops that are asleep to be ferried across later at night. They try to drop them off at first light so they can see where they're going in the daylight. And so that is what's going to happen. And now 2 people are left, just 2 people are left, okay, to go onto those boats, get around all these people, get to the engine. You've got to blow up the engine, and you've got to blow up the fuel tank. And this is diesel fuel tank, it's not petrol, so it's a different technique. Diesel doesn't burn as easy as petrol, it doesn't blow up as easy. So you've got to know what you're doing. So we go in there, there's 2 of us left, myself and another little guy, I'll show you in a minute. We're both hobbits, we're not even big dudes. And so now we have to go in there, we have to put the charges down, you have to arm the charges and sneak out, go onto the next ferry, one of us is guarding the other one, then onto the next ferry and come out again. Then we've got to pick up those 2 guys at the tip there, we've got to pick up those 2 guys there on our way through, not get compromised or anything like that, come back down, pick up the canoes and the 2 guys and come back across the Zambezi. And as we did that at first light, the whole thing blew up and just everything blowing to bits and screaming and yelling and everything else going on there. So to the SAS, that's like, that's the best sight in the world. That's like the wallabies flogging the All Blacks all over again. But, the point I'm making is that
that set the war effort back at least 2 years. It took 2 years for the Chinese to rebuild those ferries, because we thought really the Russians and the Chinese funded that whole war against us. So we set that war effort back by 2 years. Thousands of lives would have been saved. We'll never know. And keep in mind, it's a Friday night in Rhodesia as well. Everybody's in the clubs and the pubs, they're night clubbing, they're watching TV, they're playing rugby, whatever's going on Friday. The civilians don't have a clue what's going on. That's behind enemy lines. The SAS guys, 2 young men, using their skills, their gifting, their life's training, are doing their assignment. And if they didn't do it, thousands more civvies would have been killed by those things. Okay? So that's what we call a call sign. That's the people that did it. It was a bit of a celebration on the Saturday morning. Everybody was prone. This is Dumpy LaRue. He looks a little bit prosperous. Because he was in the boat section, he didn't have to be as fit as everyone else. There's yours truly. That's little John next to me. We were the 2 little dudes, but we did most of the demolitions in the SAS for a long time because we were both trained in dems. This is Mac McIntosh. He was the officer in charge, and he was one of the guys sitting by the tip there. He was the only other guy qualified of placing those DEMS charges and so on. So if one of us was killed, he had to step in quickly. He's since got killed after that. But that's what happens. That's the importance of the individual when we're talking assignment. Okay, so it's just the reason I tell stories, and it's a bit of a war story and stuff. And again, it's not to glorify war. It's so that people remember stuff. We all remember stories, and so you can go out of here and think, yeah, that was a fancy war story, but it's actually to help us to remember how important it is that we actually do our assignments because people rely on us. All right. Okay, so let me give you a testimony and bring it all into the modern era, because I'm talking about life's training, guys, and I'm trying to get everybody off the fact that woe is me because of my past. Okay, so many people dwell on the past, and I've worked with people and pulled them out of it. I've worked with people with psychological problems. Believe it or not, I had to. My pastor, he could see I didn't even know how to listen. He said, Dave, you have to go and do a counselling course for a year at this academy, and then you have to go and counsel these men, secular men in the marketplace, in Athen tablelands. And I just thought, you're off your face, pastor, but he's the boss, so I did it. I tell you what, I learned so much because I didn't even know anything. This is all life's experience and training and so on, So I'm going to go through that life's training so that you see what it's like, so that you view your past as part of your training. It's an asset. It's good for you. Okay? And then also you get to understand how your gift fits in and how we should be using our gift. And make sure we use it for the kingdom, not for the wrong thing. I always use mine for the wrong thing until I understood things. So I grew up in Zambia. Let's go flicking forward a bit. Yep. So I grew up in Zambia. Sorry, you guys, can you look and see across the board here? But right at the top of that line, I'm colourblind, whatever colour that line is, in a place called Mufulira. So right on the border with the Congo in Central Africa. And I grew up there, and I was literally a white, black kid. So I played with all the black kids. I never spoke English. My first language was Bemba. And I learned the bush. I learned to track and to trap and to make string and to make fire. I knew the bush as well as they did. I only spoke English when I came home because my parents were Poms and they forced me to speak English to them. But it wasn't very good English. Okay, so that was in the 1950s. And then late in the 50s, the independence, the British are decolonising Africa, as they should have. And then, so the independence movements are sweeping south across Africa. My parents decided that as Zambia started getting independence, that it's dangerous, there's people getting killed, there's quite a lot of violence happening. We need to send this kid to boarding school. So they sent me to boarding school. I was 4 years old. Okay, they sent me to boarding school. In January, they put me on a train in Mufulira, and I had to go to a little town called Ndola nearby. They drove me there, put me on a train, and sent me down there, 3,000 kilometres away. Okay, it's January, see you in June. Unescorted across 4 countries, through Botswana, which was hostile to white kids. You clear customs and immigration, you go through all of these countries, and there was 4 terms, four school terms. The term in the middle was only a 10-day holiday. It took 10 days for the train to do that journey one way. It's an old steam train. So it stopped at every big tree, just to refuel and chop wood down and chuck it in. So it was a crazy life. But think of that when you put the kid on the bus to go to school. Okay, see you in June. So that's what happened, unescorted. And when I got to South Africa, there's an apartheid regime. I'm a white black kid. I don't know even English. And in the area where I was, even though it's the Cape Province, right at the southern tip of Africa, the Cape Province is predominantly English speaking, but not in King Williamstown. It's a Dutch Afrikaner place. And so now I'm going to school, I go to find the black kids, the white kids have beat my brains out for trying black kids run away because they're not allowed to talk to white kids. Okay, and I don't know apartheid, I don't know independence, I don't know colonising, decolonising. I'm thinking, why have my parents said, what did I do wrong? And so why is everyone don't want to talk to me? Why are these clowns punching me? And so I totally grew up with complete rejection. So if you can't understand it, at 4 years old you don't know anything, man. And so for me, those were my junior school years, and it carried on. And so I learned English and Afrikaans pretty fast. But at the end of the day, I also learned to fight, I learned to repel and counter and so on. But on the train journeys, no supervision, learn about the birds and the bees and how to drink and smoke and, smoking pot. I didn't smoke a lot of pot because it didn't seem to work with me. My brain didn't succumb for some reason. But everyone else was. And, it was, I look back on it now and think, yeah, what fun, But the point is, that was the adversity that I faced as a little kid, okay? We're talking life's experiences here. So I grew up with all that rejection, and I set about proving myself because I thought my parents had given me away. I grew up without parents. And so I set about proving myself. I even became an Olympian. I was working so hard and trying to be a hero. Okay, but one day I'm coming home from school on the train and my parents have moved into Rhodesia. Okay, which is now Zimbabwe, as I said. And they've come down from Zambia, now they're living in there. My dad was a prison officer running a prison farm, and at the station I come in, they said, okay, we live here now. I said, okay, awesome. So now we go live on the farm. I get sent to boarding school within Rhodesia now, okay? And so that was about 1965, which was the time that Rhodesia declared independence from the UK and the war started. So during my high school years, I was at school, at boarding school, but I came home every weekend because I only lived 20 kilometres away, and I began to learn the local language. It was in that region, in central Rhodesia, was Shona. So I became a Shona speaker. That was, it wasn't my first language, but I was fluent. And I went to go play with all the black kids on the farm and just did what I just naturally gravitated because I love the bush. Okay, I'm telling you all of this because it was important later on. It's part of our life's training. Okay, so while I was at school in Rhodesia, there's a war raging around us all the time, and the reason I actually got thrown out of school. I got thrown out of school because my girlfriend was pregnant, and I'll leave that to your imagination how that happened. But we wanted to get married, and my parents wouldn't, and her parents wouldn't let us get married either. And in those days, you actually had to do what your parents told you to do, unlike today. And so we couldn't get married. They both said, no, you're too young. I just turned 17. So she got sent to a maternity home, I got sent to the war. We all had to do 2 years national service at that point in time. And by then the war had been going for 5 years, okay? So we are schoolboys going into battle against an enemy that's been at war for 5 years. So it was a very hostile environment. But I'm an entrepreneur. My girlfriend and I wanted to get married, and we said as soon as we're old enough, we'll get married and we'll have our kid and we'll live happily ever after. That was both of our vision. So I went into that army thinking, how am I going to fund this? How am I going to fund maternity fees, living at the maternity home, maintenance, all the things that I have to pay for her while this war's going on. I'm going to make money out of this war. That's my mindset. I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, the gifting is always there, guys. You can be a singer, you can make CDs, and you can sell the CDs. You're not selling your voice. Your gifting is still with you always. And that's why I make the point Joseph knew those dreams when he was 17, right? So it's the same thing. My gifting, I'm an entrepreneur. So I joined the SAS purely because they paid the most. Nothing else. But by then I was a very aggressive, horrible little piece of work. And it was not that hard for me to get into the SAS. The selection course was really, really difficult. Very few people get in. Over 800 started the course. 8 of us passed. Okay? And most of them, they get rid of you on the pre-selection. If there's too many, you just swim underwater at 3 a.m. across the river until you pop on your head, you out. Because they only want the ones who are desperate to get in. And they do their best to drown you to get in. It's crazy stuff. But anyway, I got in because there was more pay, and I needed to pay. That was my driver. Okay, the gifting, not even using it for the right thing at that time, but still normal enough. Okay, so in the Rhodesian army, you're not allowed to get shot until you're 18. I was still 17, so lots and lots of training. And when the SAS train you, it's the most intense training you can think of. And that was why when I came out and I turned 18 and was deployed, I was so well qualified in advanced demolitions and so on. So myself and Little John Haynes did most of the demolitions work in the SAS for the next 4 years, all over Central and Southern Africa, blowing up stuff and whatnot. Okay? So I did a lot of the stuff that you think about. You guys have got, New Zealand SAS is an awesome unit. Lots of New Zealand SAS guys came and fought with us because they believed in our cause against communism, and they were excellent soldiers. Okay? I don't say that about all armies, because we had other armies that were useless. Okay, so on Christmas Day in 1973, my baby son was born on Christmas Day. Little Messiah happened there. And, but you know, we were kept incommunicado, deliberately kept incommunicado. So I was never able to contact my girlfriend during that period. And one day I was deep inside Mozambique. We were there blowing up a railway bridge, and you know, you get parachuted in and you're there. It's not like no one's going to come and pick you up, you know. And I got a signal from my brother. My brother was in the police, and he was in special branch, so he had access to the radio, and he sent me a Morse code saying, you know, yeehaw, your girlfriend's just got married, the husband, the new hubby has adopted the kid, you don't have to pay maintenance anymore. Now my whole vision was, we need to get out of here so we can get married. And suddenly this has happened. And in hindsight, I don't blame her, because she didn't know if I'm going, didn't even know I'm alive. You know, it's been a year, and a bit more than a year, and now, so some guy had fallen in love with her and everything, and he's going to take on the baby. And for me, all of that rejection hadn't gone away, even though I was very successful in the SAS, because I was driving, proving myself idiot, maniac dude. And, you know, but then, it's like half a cup of anger, add that to the rejection, you know, when I blew up that bridge, it really blew it up. But that's what happened, and by the time I got back, it was about 6 weeks later, and so by then they've gone, they've emigrated to South Africa, and I was thinking about it all the way, how do you undo a marriage, what am I going to say, and when I got back, there was just no point, they're gone, I've never seen them again, never seen the kid, anything. So I had to get over it, okay? And this is all your life's training, so all the adversity that we face in our lives, and which stands me in good stead now, but I was pretty annoyed at the time. So what happened after that, because I was just such a nasty piece of work, the Squadron Sergeant Major in the SAS called me in, and he said, Hodgson, you have one more fight in this unit, I'm sending you to the School of Infantry for a year, you can go and train recruits. And that's the worst thing you can do to an operational SAS soldier. You'd rather get wounded, you know. So I just said, oh, I need to get out of here. And a unit, there was another Special Forces unit in Rhodesia called the Zulu Scouts. And they came to me and they said, we're hearing about these issues of yours, do you want to come and join us? And the only reason they asked me that is because I was as fluent as any indigenous guy in their language and customs and the bush and everything else. And in the Zulu Scouts, very different to the SAS. SAS, you work behind enemy lines, and you know, you guys all know about the SAS. Zulu Scouts, you infiltrated the enemy ranks. Okay, you have to become a terrorist. We were trained to become terrorists. You've got to first do the selection course, which was much harder than the SAS course, because it took your food away, because terrorists got no food, so you better be able to live off the bush. And they had to get food from the villages, and when there was none, you had to eat off the bush. So, and I knew how to do all that. So I passed, I was the only white guy left on the course after 3 days, and about 70 black guys that were Matabele guys, a different tribe to the language that I spoke. I knew little bits and pieces, but it didn't matter, it was only a selection course. But after the selection course, you go on the dark phase, and you can look at this on their association website and so on. You see my name there with all of it. Point being, you go on the dark phase, and that is when they teach you to become a terrorist. And then when you finish that, it's like Daniel going to the University of the Chaldeans. Daniel's a Jew, he's going to the post-pagan university in the world, Babylonian University. He came out 10 times better than them. If you're going to work undercover, it's very different working behind enemy lines. You better be 10 times better than your enemy, because you ain't coming home if you aren't. Okay? And so that's what we had to do. And we had to infiltrate their ranks. Now, how does a white guy with different colour eyes and a pointy nose infiltrate their ranks? We always worked at night, as did they. It's very rare for them to work in the day, because our Air Force is amongst the best in the world, like the Israeli Air Force is these days. Okay? So they were never out in the daytime. So we worked at night, we were able to infiltrate their ranks. But we had to have an intimate knowledge of the enemy. And this has stood me in such good stead. When I became a Christian, everyone's talking about the enemy, and the enemy's been defeated, and I'm thinking, how come the enemy's defeated if these kids are poking needles in their arms, these ones are committing suicide, the Christian marriages are falling apart at 50%? What is this? And none of the Christians could explain that. They couldn't, Jesus defeated the enemy. Did he? Well, how come this is going on? And what about that? And what about this? Oh no, they get forgiven 170 times 7 times, too late, they're dead. You know, it's stuff. I just couldn't, well, let's get an AK and fix this enemy. That was my logic. I know how to do that. You know, I make a bit of Christian. You know, so the point being, when you learn the enemy, that's why we're filming that. And I've lectured on knowing your enemy extensively over the years at Chaotic. That's the big lecture series we're putting together now that I mentioned. I think is over 120 grand already on it. Anyway, so here's a little thing. This is from the Sulu Scouts website. It's like it's an American website about the Sulu Scouts. Okay, it's a quick look. The Sulu Scouts training and operational doctrine inculcated audacity and an intimate knowledge of the enemy. At various times, for example, white Sulu Scouts posed as the prisoners of black Sulu Scout terrorists and were escorted into terrorist strongholds where white prisoners were highly prized. At the appropriate moment, so that's quite risky stuff. Yeah. At the appropriate moment, the Sulu Scouts turned their weapons on the terrorists, wreaking havoc from within. The classic example of audacity and an intimate knowledge of the enemy was the Sulu Scouts' raid on a large Zanla terrorist camp at Yonzonyo Pungwi in August 1976. Using unimogs and ferrets and stuff all painted in Frelimo colours, so in enemy colours, enemy camouflage, 84 Sulu Scouts penetrated Mozambique and drove directly into a large terrorist camp. So they think the 84 that are coming in are terrorists coming to join them, okay? Thousands of terrorists are in the camp preparing for morning formations. 84 against thousands. Okay, you can put to flight a lot if you do stuff God's ways. God's way is war, but still, an analogy. Okay, thousands of terrorists were in the camp preparing for morning formations when the scouts opened fire with all their hardware. Estimates of the number of terrorists killed ran as high as 1,000, all for 5 slightly wounded Sulu scouts. As the scouts withdrew back to Rhodesia, they blew up the Ponga River Bridge behind them, thus frustrating pursuit. Okay, so that's the sort of stuff that we did, and I did that for 4 years. So I was in the SAS for 4 years, and then the scouts for 4 years, and when I was in the scouts that I met my wife, not the girl who took off the other guy, and we got married, and we've been married ever since. Okay? Berlin. So after that I became a mercenary for 2 years, and this is a funny thing, and this might help some of the men here, digressing a wee bit, but it's quite important. When I became a mercenary after 8 years in the military, that was all I knew, okay? That was my day job, that was all I knew. And I left the army, my time was up as a regular, because obviously I did 2 years national service, but halfway through that I realised I could make more money as a regular, so I signed on, and we were unemployable. The whole generation was unemployable. The wars were being invaded by 2 massive armies, we were totally outnumbered, places being swamped. So my generation, we did our 2 years national service, they let you out for 6 months. If you're going to go and do tertiary, they let you go to uni. If you've done like me, you couldn't do tertiary. So they just kept calling out, month in, month out, month in, month out. So nobody wanted to employ you. So therefore you might as well become a regular, get the best pay and fight with regular soldiers instead of national servicemen. So I did that, which is why I was in the army for 8 years. And then came the bit when I left the army and they said, we can't afford to lose guys like you. Will you come back in and as a mercenary, and we'll pay you per kill, per terrorist killed, per AK, per landmine, per capture. And this was vast amounts of money compared to the wages that I was on, having been in the army for 8 years. So the entrepreneurial gifting kicks in, the training kicks in, yep, pick me. So I came back in, and they isolated areas in the country that had been overrun completely by the enemy. They said, you guys can go and work in there. Okay? So I did that. No support, no backup, no nothing, you're on your own. And I went and did that. I did that for 2 years. And out of that, I was successful at that, and I funded a big fishing company. On Lake Kariba, there was big commercial fishing going. So I ended up funding 3 big commercial trawlers and had a significant fishing company. Now, when I became a Christian, and at that point, I knew we were going to lose the war. Okay, very experienced soldiers, all those years, I knew we were going to lose the war. Not on the ground, we're losing it because America and Britain were closing in on South Africa, forcing them to stop supplying us with oil. No oil, you can't fight the war. We even making our own oil out of sugar, we pioneered that. Okay, but it wasn't enough to fight a battle, fight a war. So I, in my mind, am fighting the war to fund my company. I'm no longer fighting for king and country. Okay, I'm using it as a cap raise. Now, the people I'm hunting down are shooting back. They're terrorists trying to kill me, but the fact is they think they're freedom fighters. They're fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for the same country. They're not fighting for money. I'm fighting for money. The greed and self-centeredness that I've been mentioning. Maximizing self-interest at the expense of others. Okay? So that, when I became a Christian, was really hard for me to reconcile. Will the Lord forgive that? And I thought, for many years, I was a Christian for 4 years before I actually accepted forgiveness. because I heard the pastor talking about, God can forgive the liar and the cheat, and I'm thinking, geez, my kids lie and cheat every day, Sure, that's easy. I shop people for money to fund my company. And so, the pastor thinking, he can forgive the drug addict and the alcoholic, and I look at all the people who had a motorcycle business. Everybody was a drug addict and alcoholic, in Perth. And of course, that's easy, but I shop people for money. And eventually, years later, I heard the pastor talking about Paul, the Apostle Paul. And when I looked at that, and I was sitting in church reading the Bible while he was preaching, I thought, wow, look at this dude. And it says there in Timothy, he was the worst of all sinners. Like, is he worse than me? Why? Well, he hunted down Christians and killed them. I didn't hunt Christians, I hunted terrorists. I didn't stop to ask if they had faith or anything, because it was a war. The point is, they were armed and shooting back, and Paul's killing unarmed Christians and deliberately going after them, and he's holding jackets while other people stone them. And when I saw that, and he wrote after the New Testament, he got so forgiven, I thought, well, okay, the Lord can forgive me. So it's just a bit of a side thing, but that's what happened. Anyway, the war ended in 1980, and the SAS left the country and as a unit and went and joined South African Army, became 5 Recce Commando. The Zulu Scouts were disarmed and disbanded. The population, especially the white population, was disarmed, and Robert Mugabe turned on his allies, as happens in Africa, wiped out 30,000 in the Matabele army that he fought side by side with, and took over the country, took over every government position, and proceeded to plunder a prosperous country into the starving mess that it is today, okay? Because of corruption, not because he's black, not because they were white people, not because of any of that, except greed and self-centeredness. Okay, so that's what happened. Now, during that time, so from 1980, it was a ceasefire of independence. I was there for another 2 years. I was one of the only SAS guys left in the country. Everyone's gone. And he promised there won't be a witch hunt, and you guys please stay and help build the new Zimbabwe. So I stayed. I'd sold the fishing company. I had 2 mines. Very wealthy young guy. By then I had 2 mines as well. Because all the miners had been killed in the bush. I was operating the bush. I knew where the mines were. I just went out and reclaimed them. And they were mine. So then Mugabe forms a mineral marketing board, and it's the same gift, right? Entrepreneur. Forms a mineral marketing board. We are compelled to socialist government, forces us to sell the minerals to the government, puts the price of minerals down, sapphires and tantalite, and then puts the price of wages up, and deliberately puts the junior miners out of business. So I came to Australia in 1982 with a camera. Used to have cameras, used to have films. Some of you kids wouldn't know that. But the film, we filled it up with sapphires and put it back together and came out to Australia to see if we could bypass this crooked mineral marketing board. And while I was in Australia, on a 3-month visa, I got accused of blowing up a squadron of British Hawk jets back at the airfield in one of Mugabe's airfields. Now, those jets were blown up before I left to come to Australia, and they couldn't find who did it. And so they eventually decided it was me, because I was one of the last guys left who used to do that, before lunch. So, and the airstrip has a common border with my parents' farm. So we thought nothing of it, because it wasn't me who did it. And so we're here in Australia, we're just about ready to go up. My mother phones, and she's just got her voice back. They've been strangling her, the CRD there, which doesn't exactly have a lot of compassion for anybody, and they've been strangling her to find out where I am. And she just hasn't been able to speak. They're every night bashing her, and she gets on the phone and says, "You can't come back. I'm waiting for you at the airport in Harare." And so we tried to get into Australia. Aussie said, "No, you're not refugees. Out you go." So Merlin's okay, because her plane goes back to South Africa, where our kids are with Granny. My plane goes straight back to Harare. So we said goodbye in Sydney. We didn't know we were ever going to see each other again, all over again, and history repeats itself. But basically, my plane stopped in Singapore to refuel. Okay, so just telling you all about life's experience, guys, so we can understand this assignment stuff. So it stops in Singapore to refuel, and then, fortunately, and so I'd go charging into the immigration department and say, "Hey, can I come in? I'm a tourist." And they say, "Yes, of course, 2 weeks, everyone gets 2 weeks if you go." So I go galloping in to Singapore. I've got 2 weeks reprieve. That's heaps for an entrepreneur. I've got nothing in the world. I'm stateless. I've got no country to live in. I've got no network of people that I know. When you go on holiday with your wife for 3 months, and there's one suitcase, everything in the suitcase is hers. So she's got that. I got nothing. So I'm in Singapore stranded with nothing. But I got a gift as an entrepreneur. So I went taking off to this commercial diving company, and there was actually a Kiwi guy who was operations manager, ex-New Zealand Navy, lieutenant, and I'd heard about him because other Rhodesian guys had got jobs there.
And the funny thing, I went there and I just lied my way into a diving job. So it wasn't a Christian, you can lie fluently if you're not a Christian. I was good at it. And I just lied. I said, I'm the best diver, and this and that. And he just looked at me and smirked and said, he recognised the accent, tell me your story. So I told him my story. He said, come in, brother. So Rhodesians and South Africans were prized in the oil field because we weren't unionised, we had never heard of unions, we did everything we were told, we were very disciplined, and we didn't care about risk. With nothing compared with what we'd been through. So we were excellent people to employ. So he said to me, I know you can't dive, just get in the workshop. So there I was, okay, I had a job, but it was like $60 a day or something, which was nothing in those days in 1982. And so now I've got some reprieve, and I learned to dive at night when everybody went home. I'm going through all the diving manuals, reading all the diving books. I had nothing else to do and no one to talk to. So I just went through everything. I learned to dive and trying on all the helmets, stripping and assembling these things and this and that and that. And within about 3 months, I reckoned I could dive. And one day another guy came through and he got deployed and went out on a saturation system, which is where the money was, okay? And so I said to him, hey, Merv, how come he went out and I can't go? He said, because he's a medic, and we have to have a medic. The only rules in Southeast Asia in those days was you had to have a medic. Everything else, there was no barriers to entry. That's why I got in. Anyone could get in. But at the end of the day, I said to him, well, if he's a medic, I'm also a medic. Everybody in the SAS is a medic. And for a change, I was telling the truth. And he said, yeah, okay, I never even thought of that. He said, well, you go out next, because they've got to have medics in the SAT chambers. And so the next job that went out was to Japan. And that was it. Within another 2 weeks, I was 400 feet below the sea of Japan, saturation chamber for 35 days at a time, working on the bottom of the ocean. I had not a single clue what I was doing, but there I was earning $1,000 US a day. And I was able to get my family. My biggest problem at that time was if Mugabe gets hold of one of my kids, then I've got to go back. My little player, my strategy's over. So I had to get them out, and $1,000 a day didn't take long. So by the end of that year, I had them all living in Singapore. My very first dive, very first day of the very first dive, I jumped on by a giant octopus, 400 feet. You don't come up, it takes 4 days to decompress. You decompress quicker, you just fizz like a coke, you're dead in seconds, not even a minute you're dead. Okay, you deal with it on the bottom. That's what's going on in this thing. And that was on a video, and I sent it to my wife. I said, look what I'm going to do to you. Because they video you while you're working. Anyway, from there, a few years later, we managed, it took us 3 years after that to get into Australia. We went to Perth, we bought a motorcycle business just randomly, because I like motorcycles, and thought, well, let's see what happens. And it was a trashed out business. We built it into a multi-million-dollar business. We took it up to $2 million. That was my natural ceiling, guys. This is $2 million as in my DNA, my gifting. I can become a millionaire quite quickly from nothing to that until I started doing my assignment. And look, now it's $1 billion plus. Okay. Prior to that, everything was $2 million. Even fishing, mining, bounty hunting, didn't matter, okay? Commercial diving, it was always $2 million. That's my natural DNA, that's my capacity, that seems to be the ceiling. Never got above it, not once. And I worked in 9 different sectors and had lots and lots of businesses. Anyway, I get to Perth, take this trashed out motorcycle, build it up into a $2 million company, and my wife, we're living there happily ever after in heaven, because Australia is like New Zealand, it's heaven compared to it. And so it's there that I became a Christian. So Merlin is, we go, she's a Christian since Noah, and she's hassling me, to come to church. So I love her, to shut her up, I go to church with her, and it just keeps the peace. But I don't believe it. And also it was quite easy to sell motorbikes, the Christians are pretty gullible. So that was why I was going to church, see if I could make some money out of the kingdom. But I never believed anything that I heard, and I didn't want to be saved, and so I just didn't want to be a lip-stick Christian at all. But God sends emails to the preachers, the visiting ministry comes through and says, that guy, he's not saved, that wasn't saved. So they kind of know. So I'm sitting there with my wife, we're holding hands in the back, always in the back, and the new visiting ministry says, now altar call, and they eyeball me when I look away, give a squeeze on the hand, pull it away. I didn't want to be a Christian. And one day, Reinhard Bonnke's coming to town. You heard of him? So he's coming to town, and he's having a big crusade at the entertainment centre in Perth. 6,000-seat auditorium, everyone is there, and Merlin's hassling me. And terrorism is all about wearing people down. She's a much better terrorist than and she's wearing me down. You will love this guy, he comes from Africa. So eventually she won that battle, and so I said, okay, we'll go. but these are the rules, okay? We're not going in any of our company cars, because I don't want the motorcycle fraternity to see me mixing with you liberals and Christians. And then we're going in last. We're going to stand by the door, sit right by the door. When the lights come on, we're making swastikas out of there. Escape invasion. And he said, I don't care, I just want you there. Just want you, you'll identify with him. Anyway, so we did that, exactly that. We went, sat by the door, it's full, the place is packed, the lights are off, there's only one light right up, he's down there on the stage, and he's busy doing his number, and then suddenly he stops, and he goes dead quiet, and he points up the aisle, right where I'm sitting. He can't see, there's not even a sea of faces, it's black. And he says up there, like a German accent, and up there, he said, there's a young executive in the motor industry, and he said, you're here under duress tonight. And he said, the Lord's knocked on your door many times, and tonight could be the last time. So come now, come quickly. And I looked at Lily and I said, geez, do you think he's talking about me? And she said, well, what do you think? So I said, I think as a setup, one of your disciples is down there. So, and he switched on all the lights, and he's not exactly a patient guy either. He's saying, come on. And so my mind said, I'm going to go there and find whoever's dogged me in down there. So I forgot I'm supposed to be clandestine. Everyone's clapping, yay, this guy's going to get saved. So I go trotting down there, and I'm looking around behind the stage, and there's no one there. And that's how I came to actually become a Christian. I realised when there's none of Merlin's mates down there, then it's actually, there is a God. Okay, and he's a bit more important than the motorcycle fraternity. So, and eventually when I accepted forgiveness, I became a Christian. But then we sold the business later, moved up to the far north Queensland, and at that point in time, I knew that as a Christian entrepreneur, relatively immature, been Christian 4 or 5 years, that my job was to fund the kingdom. I didn't think identifying the kingdom or anything. Kingdom's massive. I just think, yeah, I'll fund that. That's all I knew. So that meant funding my local church. So the pastor sees, a bit of a gift on this guy, leadership, and that bring him on the board. So I'm on the board of the church, and I'm looking at this, and I can see how much money is coming in. I know how much I'm putting in. So I've got this all going, yep, I'm a good Christian. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and so on. But I was really relatively immature. And then in 1998, the pastor got transferred down to the Sunshine Coast, 1,700 kilometres away, to help rebuild another church there. So it's part of the Christian Outreach Centre movement, the COC. He goes down there to do that. And one of the elders in the church comes to me a couple of months later, and he says, Dave, I had a dream, a vision. There was this couple that came from Africa, and they stood with Pastor Dan and Anne, who's left down there, same pastor who said you're going to die one day, him. And this couple stood with them, they built a mighty church. And I said, that's awesome, John. And John is really accurate, he's a quiet guy, he's a farmer, he's very quiet, but he's very accurate. And so I said, it's awesome, John. Storm, my son Storm and Shelley, they're going down soon. They're moving, they're leaving the Tablelands, and they're going down there to help Pastor Dan. And Storm is a youth pastor, and Shelley's a music director, 2 good-looking kids. What more could you want? And he says, no. Shelley's an Aussie girl. This couple came from Africa, Sue and Merlin. And then he walks away and says, John, come back here. He said, that's all I know, you deal with it. So, in my head, I'm thinking, I can't go. The church is going to collapse. I'm on the board. I know how much money's coming. I know what we're doing. I've got a $2 million company running, okay, again. And now if I fold up and go, but in my heart, I'm thinking, maybe this is the Lord telling me to do something. This is how I found my assignment, okay, the hard way. And so I never went. I stayed at the church because my head was saying, this is not, don't leave. You can't, no one's going to be able to fund this, it's going to collapse. So I had a mobile phone company. I was selling plans. In 1998, there was no smartphones and so on. That's when they came in, and the prepaid cards. So I had telemarketers all over far north Queensland, offices all upstairs, the cheapest offices, and everything were going well. And then the big carriers came to me and they said, hey Dave, we're bringing out all these smartphones, prepaid cards. You guys are going to go out of business. We've done this overseas. We know the results. You're one of our best dealers. We need you to move downstairs and open up a shop front and sell hardware. And I couldn't because we had leases, tons of them. So I couldn't. I thought, well, that's okay. I'm a Christian. God will look after me because I'm funding the kingdom. But I was doing good things, but I wasn't doing God things. I was not in His will. He had given me an assignment. I was ignoring it because I thought different. I was immature. No one was teaching on assignment. I hadn't heard of the word. I knew the word from the military. When Christians don't do assignments, we just fund the kingdom and live happily ever after. No other commitment. So that's what happened. So I couldn't move, and so we lost all of our customers. Okay, so nothing dishonest, no sin that I could put a finger on, and so on. And ultimately, after 2 years, we ended up with nothing. So from a multi-millionaire back to zero. And then on our credit cards, we drew cash to pay the last of the wages and pay off the last of the leasing, and all the leases expired, and we were totally and utterly broke. We'd sold all our clothes, we'd sold our cars, we'd sold every single thing that we could possibly sell. If we had eBay in the day, I would have eBayed my wife's dog. We didn't have eBay yet. So we were bust completely. So we weren't bankrupt, we never declared bankrupt because we didn't owe anybody anything when we finished, except $76,000 on our credit card. All of it above 20% interest because we drew cash. Now we better go and do what God said. So we had one old Land Cruiser left, which was boiling. Every one occasion I had to stop and let it cool down. It was a tree again. And so by the time we got to Caloundra, it was 3 days to get there on that boiling car. 5 of us had 1 loaf of bread for 3 days. So we had 1/15 of a loaf of bread per day each. Multi-millionaire. This is how God gets our attention. Especially the best way for God to get the attention of God dropping it is shut down the cash flow. And oh Lord, why is there a famine in the land? That's exactly what happened to us. So we came to Paladin. 3 days later, we went to the church that the prophetic had told me to go to, and I never told anybody why we're there. Of course, I was too proud to tell them we broke and stuff. So I just said, oh yeah, how are you going? So we joined the church. And on the 3rd Sunday night that I'm there, Pastor Dave McDonald comes through. He's the National Chairman of Christian Outreach Centre. He doesn't know me. I know of him. I've never met him. And he calls me out. Now, you know, by then I've got a job as on $5 an hour. It's the only job I've ever had. Okay, for $5 an hour as a builder's labourer. I'm in my late 40s. I've got no money. I've got no nothing. I've got all this debt and so on. And he calls me out. He says, the Lord showed me there's finances written all over you, and you will write 6-figure checks for this church in the near future. $100,000 checks. I already owe 76 grand. You know, I'm getting $5 an hour. Nobody wants to employ an old fossil, you know. And I've got kids at school and everything else is going down. But you know what? It was confirmation for me. It was suddenly, I thought, wow, why didn't I get this 2 years ago? Why didn't someone show me 2 years ago? Okay. So my wife was there, so we're on the same page. We go home that night, open the paper after church. How do we make 100 grand? My mind says we need to make 100 grand and we can go home. It wasn't God's mindset, but that's what I was just thinking. So how do we do this? So I thought, okay, if we can, let's find how. What have we got to do? So in Australia, you can become a real estate salesperson in 5 days. So quick and easy, make lots of money. And there's another one here. Oh, Aussie Home Loans is looking for a finance broker. Only one. It's the biggest finance broking company in the nation, and they want one. So I thought, if I can learn the banks, learn all their credit policies, learn how money works, I can write 100. I just borrow it somehow. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't care about debt. I just borrow it. We'll pay the church, and we can go back home and play. And then, so we decided, okay, got to get this job. But I had no clothes. How am I going to get an interview? So everybody wanted that job. There were hundreds of applicants. So they narrowed it down to 20 over a period of 2 weeks on the phone. Even did a psych test with me on the phone, psychological test. And I didn't lie, I just left stuff out, you know. So the point is, I got down to that interview. Then I had to go and borrow the pastor's clothes. I said, Dan, if I'm going to fund your church, I need your jacket. Dan's smaller than me. And by now it's the year, it's 2000. In 2000, the pastors, especially when you come to a church that's trash, your pastor gets all his clothes from St. Vincent's. So everything's second-hand, tweed, horrible dressing gown, cord for a tie. So I went to go to this interview, and I got there late, and I walked into the interview, and 19 people are sitting there waiting for me. All fancy 3-piece suits, the girls there with their long eyelashes on. Look at me thinking, why are you late? And I walk in looking like the feral from Koran. And I was terrified. And I turned and walked out. And this is so amazing what happened. I turned and walked out of there. I just thought, forget it, it's not my scene. And the lady said, excuse me, sir, the receptionist said, no, I'm out of here. I went to the bathroom, and I was washing my hands and looking in the mirror, and even the bathroom's too fancy, it's all marble, you know, there's music happening, and the lights are dim. And I'm looking in the mirror, thinking, how hopeless I am, and just whinging at myself. And you know what? The Lord came into my head with like a hammer. It was the most profound thing that's ever happened to me. Lots of profound things have happened to me, like octopuses jumping on me and stuff. But the point is, it was like, you know when Moses didn't circumcise his kid, and God was going to kill him. God had enough of his rubbish. And God said I was going to kill him. And Sephora had to help him. And she did, well, hang on, I fixed it all up. It felt like he was that angry with me. And it's like he came into my head. I've never heard the audible voice of God, but this time he was in my head with a hammer, banging on my brain. And he was saying, where did you learn this fear? I've never taught you fear. You know, you've been through all this stuff. And in front of the mirror, my whole life flashed past in a fraction of a second. All these things, and I listened to them here. Where have you learned? I never taught you this fear. From the days of being an infant at boarding school, the rejection, the bullying, the fighting with the white guys in South Africa, the train journeys. You know, I got lost in the bush in the Belgian Congo. There was a war going on. I was lost for days. It didn't matter but my mom had beat my brains out when I got home for being lost. So I was only 5. Fighting wars for 9 years, especially mates blown out. I got blown out. Both my eyes were blinded for a long time. My ears were blown out. Putting bits and pieces of friends into bags, trying to explain it to their fiancés, you know, years as a mercenary, fighting entirely on my own often, losing my son, my plane trip to be hung, all this stuff when, you know, giant octopuses, one time my hot water system got turned off at 400 feet and it's cold at the bottom of the Sea of Japan. You got like 3 seconds to live and I died, I had to be resuscitated, can't come up. All the stuff that happened, being penniless in my life, was the Lord showed me that this was my life's training. And it was like he said, these are the strands of adversity that are the threads of your life, that I've woven into a mighty rope that nobody can break, if only you will be obedient, if only you will do what I want you to do. Now get out there and take dominion. It was like the word dominion. Get out there and take dominion. You know, and I looked in the mirror, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm like a grasshopper in my own eyes. I just turned like a slot machine into a general in God's army. My spiritual identity came. And I turned and walked out. And as I walked into that room, I suddenly thought to myself, I was scared of your clothes. Heavy SAS, Salute Scouts, mercenary, terrified of your festering clothes. You know, and I'm wearing the mantle of it's a pastor's jacket, you know, and all the stuff. And yet I realized that I am the senior spiritual authority in this room. And you better come under that, you lot. And I've already led men to battle for years and stuff, so I'm just thinking all of these things. And I got the job. I should never have got the job. And Aussie Home Loans is a sales and marketing company. Yes, they do mortgages, but they could sell Big Macs, you know. So I had to go into a sales position, and I broke their record month after month after month. And I'm not a sales guy. Hate sales. Hate closing deals. But the Lord applied his favour. And you know, we went from negative $76,000 to a $100 million company in 2 years and 7 months. Wow. Way beyond my $2 million ceiling. Way beyond it. Hundreds of times more than what I could do in my own strength. Because God applied the favour. His will, his way. His will, do my assignment. This is the job I need you to do. And look, it's coming to what we're doing now. But it's lunchtime. But the point is, his will, his way. Don't do what the Crusaders did. They did his will, they didn't do it his way. I knew, I had learned, I had to do his will, and I had to do it his way. Okay, let's have lunch again. Come back afterwards. And over to the pastor.
Okay, guys. You love that?
Yeah.
Anybody here got an assignment? Hey, we've got half an hour for lunch, so we need to maximise the time. I think I'll give thanks in here, and then when you go out, just as quickly as you can, get what you need. If there's not enough seats, feel free to filter back into here. But it's just a privilege to be able to give you lunch now. So let's just give thanks for the food, shall we? Father, I thank you for your goodness in every way. We acknowledge that every good and every perfect gift comes from above, sent from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness. So Lord, we just pray you bless the food now, the fellowship around it, in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Go and enjoy the time.
Then you see